So every year, roughly 250 players are selected to play in the National Football League.
National Football League selection meeting is
2023 NFL Draft.
Teams are slotted in this NFL draft based on how they finished the previous year. Any fan is aware of this. But after going through a considerable amount of data, I am convinced that seemingly every fan,
let's go Birds,
and apparently every GM and just about every owner,
it's D-Day for the deal makers as they look to rein in football's best playmakers,
is completely unaware of the true value of these picks. This is a story about billionaires making billion-dollar blunders, even with million-dollar staffs and analysts. This is a story about the NFL draft and how even the wealthiest elites can't overcome simple human behavior. Now, in any sports draft, there is a clear advantage to picking earlier. Obviously, it's better to have the first pick than the 20th pick. But the question is, how much of an advantage is there? And does this advantage line up with what teams actually follow, how they actually trade or value their picks? Are there any rounds or picks that seem to be overvalued? Now, fortunately, all this data is public. We obviously watch the NFL. We know what players get paid and certainly how they perform. It's a spectator sport. So we can analyze the perceived market value of each pick and how that lines up with compensation and performance. It's not going to be too difficult, but it will require a little digging. For example, how the first pick of the first round, number 1, is compared to the first pick of the second round, the 33rd overall pick. To do this, again, we have to examine how players actually performed and how they were paid. The earlier the pick, the higher the compensation. And in a league with a salary cap, compensation is an obvious variable worth considering here. So it's kind of similar to running a business. Is the salesperson that you're paying $200,000 producing more than, well, two could at, let's say, $100,000 of pay each? So we're going to rely on Dr. Thaler's data here. He's worked with a number of NFL teams. He's kind enough to share this data with the world. Data that is shocking. Let's start first with the market premium for draft picks. Since teams regularly trade draft picks, even as late as the day of the draft, we can see what the league thinks the market value is for picks based on historical data illustrated in this graph. And what we find is the first pick of the draft is worth about 5 times as much as the first pick of the second round, the 33rd overall pick in this case, based on historical behavior. So I want to pause there real quick because that is insane. What that means is the first overall pick could be traded in a series of trades for 5 second-round picks. So again, that is a steep graph, and what's even more odd here is just how orderly the data is. It is rare that you find data that follows the line this closely. So what the heck is going on here? How are these teams evaluating these trades? How are they making these decisions? Well, it happens to deal with a chart that was created by then Cowboys minority shareholder Mike McCoy when he was helping out Jimmy Johnson. But here's the thing. This was never supposed to be gospel. McCoy was just trying to show Jimmy how teams had done deals in the past. He wasn't trying to give advice. It was merely a historical representation of how teams have evaluated trades. But if teams are still following this chart basically today, well, then it must be accurate. I mean, think of how much scouting's improved. Think of how much analytics have improved. These are billion-dollar organizations. They wouldn't be following a chart like this unless it made sense, right? To test this, we need to again look at compensation and performance of the players. So this first step is actually quite easy because there's a salary cap in the NFL, unlike, let's say, the MLB or the LIV, where you got folks like Dustin Johnson flying around in a PJ just to play golf, not even to win golf. Be a little bit harder if there was Saudi money here where there's no profit, but each team has to live within their own budget in the NFL. So let's look at this. Graphically, we are met with a similar steep curve. Higher picks are getting paid a lot more than later picks, and This is critically important because, well, money is finite. Each team only has so much money within their own salary cap. And really the only way a team can win in the NFL is if its aggregate players outperform what they're getting paid. So high picks are expensive in two ways. First, they're expensive because the potentiality of the trade. They could be traded for a number of different picks. And second, well, they just get paid a lot more. But that expense could be worth it if the player performs. Peyton Manning, for example, was picked just one pick higher than the next quarterback. Person at the same position, Ryan Leaf. And, well, Peyton won a Super Bowl, won a lot of playoff games, obviously brought in a lot of money to the Colts. Ryan Leaf did not. So it appears the crux of this is how good are teams at picking players? Well, we know that teams aren't perfect at picking players because obviously there are sleepers in every round, players that dramatically outperform their draft position, players like Tom Brady that was taken 6th. In the 6th round, that is.
Tom Brady, the quarterback.
He certainly ended up being worth more than a traditional 6th rounder. So, again, how good are teams at picking players? Suppose you were to rank all players at every position, not just before the draft, thanks Mel Kiper, but also after they've played in the NFL. What's the percentage chance that a player will be better than the next player taken at his position? So, for example, let's say you have a wide receiver that's taken number 33 overall. What's the chance that he is better than the next wide receiver taken at maybe, for example, number 57 overall? It's about 52%. I didn't have a coin, but it's a coin flip. So let's think of this recent Bryce Young trade that the Panthers made. The full package of assets sent to Chicago reads more like a shopping list, all just to move up 8 positions and draft Bryce Young. So the Panthers must be sure that he's the guy. Bryce is the guy. Now, it is entirely possible that Bryce Young has an amazing rookie season, has an amazing career. We're talking about how freaking stupid this video is for saying the Panthers gave up too much to go get him. But I was just personally curious, teams in the past, how has this fared for them when they've traded to go get their guy? So I looked into this 10 times. That's 10, putting 10 fingers up here. 10 times teams have traded up into the top 5 to go get their guy, to go get their quarterback. And only twice has this maybe made sense. And I emphasize maybe because one of them was Michael Vick. Many remember what happened. He had an unbelievable career for a little bit there with the Falcons, got cut short with that incident. Few remember what they gave up. They didn't give up nothing to go get this guy. They gave up LaDainian Tomlinson, future Hall of Fame running back, to go get Mike Vick, as well as some other players. So it wasn't like they just got him for free. The other time that it was a maybe, well, that was Jared Goff, and they gave up a little bit for him too. Jack Conklin, All-Pro. Derrick Henry, a decent running back.
He's the best running back in football.
Some other pretty decent players too. Corey Davis, other starters as well. So it's not like they didn't give up anything for Jared Goff. That's the only time that I would say it's maybe arguable because, well, these other players, they're not great. There was the Mitch Trubisky trade.
4 picks for the Bears to move up 1 spot. This is highway robbery.
Sam Darnold, Trey Lance, RG3.
On the ground and can't get up.
Mark Sanchez.
Smashed his face into the offensive lineman's butt.
Jeff George, Ryan Leaf.
Talk to me, all right?
And Carson Wentz. So, wasn't great. I guess we'll find out with the Panthers. Now, I want to be clear here that miscalculated trades don't just involve these guys, quarterbacks. So, here's some historically bad trades, just for fun. Perhaps my favorite, the Mike Ditka-Ricky Williams trade, where he followed a negotiation tactic I probably don't recommend anyone. He let the city know that Ricky was the savior and then proceeded to give up basically the entire Saints' future. Their entire draft class, plus 2 picks for the next year. 8 picks. These are just recent examples here. There's also the Herschel Walker trade where they literally traded an entire football team, 6 draft picks and 5 players to go get Herschel Walker.
Wow, it's Herschel Walker.
That didn't work out. Teams just do not follow rational behavior. While performance of early picks is certainly better, meaning early picks do perform better, compensation is also higher. And this surplus value, the key ingredient for team success, players performing better than they are paid, well, that doesn't come close to matching up with the initial graph we examined of the market value of picks. So if the market value for trade picks was efficient, these two graphs would be identical. But we can see here that with all key factors examined, we have a much flatter curve, meaning late round picks aren't as worthless as GMs might trade them to be. Also, take a look at how this curve slopes up to begin with. This means that with compensation and performance taken into account, the early picks are actually worth historically less than the late first round picks because, well, they are getting significantly larger rookie contracts. And again, with a salary cap in place, money is finite. For the teams in the NFL, you have to consider performance and compensation. So why do they do this? The answer is not as straightforward as you might think. It's not just emotion. The answer is actually a little bit deeper in the complexity. And what we find is a substructure that I find truly fascinating, one that you can find in business, in organizations, and in many political systems. Let me illustrate this causality by example. Let's imagine that a newly elected politician has two options. Number one, raise taxes and decrease the payout for Social Security to help balance the budget. Number two, do nothing and continue to pay out Social Security even though the Social Security fund is running out of money within the next 10 years. Which of these two options do you think our newly elected politician will choose? Yeah, it seems crazy to even debate this or question it. Obviously, option A is more rational, at least seems far more rational, but option B is far more likely because the incentives are wrong. Much of what this newly elected politician probably cares about is getting reelected, not necessarily what things will look like 10 years from now. And very similarly in the NFL, general managers get paid now. They get paid for having a job now in the present. So the priority is to keep a job. It's not necessarily what do things look like 5 to 10 years from now. It's, hey, I want to make sure that we win now, so I still have a job now. The incentives, again, are somewhat misaligned, and this creates a massive present bias where general managers are willing to sacrifice sizable future rewards for much smaller present rewards. And it's not necessarily bad to have, a present bias. Obviously, really all we have guaranteed is the moment that we're in right now in a lot of ways. But the question is, again, at what cost are we making these trades? If we look at Mike Ditka, he wasn't as concerned, obviously, with what was happening to the Saints 5-10 years from now when he was giving away 5 future rounders for Ricky Williams. He wanted to win now, and he was willing to sacrifice just about everything from a future first-round standpoint to do so. And one other factor here, if we look at the NFL owners, time is finite, and they're not necessarily getting any younger. So rebuilding for 3 to 5 years might be more of an estate plan than a game plan. And furthermore, there's a risk to unconventional thinking, even when you're right. Let's say that you maybe trade all your present picks for future picks, and you load up on future picks. Well, guess what? You might not be around to enjoy that. So even if you're doing probabilistically what makes total sense,
As a GM, you get one shot.
you might not have a job and be able to enjoy the benefits of that. So again, the incentives are wrong.
It's just one opportunity for
Teams are not only overestimating early first-round picks, but they're also overestimating present picks significantly more than future picks. We know there should be some present bias, but it is significant. To get any team to win requires a commitment to a long-term strategy. So in a way that makes the NFL no different than anything else in life. There are no shortcuts. You need everybody in the team to buy in, starting with the owner. Otherwise, the GM and coaches will just get fired for unconventional thinking, so they're just going to keep following the conventional wisdom, even if that is completely wrong. Now, A few NBA teams seem to have figured this out, at least tried to. The Sixers followed the trust the process, where they tanked historically bad and got guys like Joel Embiid, became a contender. Some might argue they never won one, but they at least became a contender out of that. We also have the Oklahoma City Thunder doing this, the Utah Jazz, and there's a present-day bias that exists in the NBA. Even if it's different than the NFL, there is still a present bias, and a few teams are willing to try that. Time will tell with the NFL. And one final personal note on this. Our relationship with time has always been profoundly interesting to me. You don't get to choose whether or not you're sacrificial, but you do get to choose what sacrifices you make. You bet the farm on one player today, that likely won't work out for you. That likely isn't a shortcut. You sacrifice for the future, and the future might be a little bit brighter. Hope you found this video helpful. Hope you enjoyed it. Take care.